I'm Rob Martwick, the Democratic Committeeperson of the 38th Ward in Chicago. I'd like to welcome you to the 80, the Cook County Democratic Party's podcast about our organization, its candidates, and its leaders. We're currently interviewing the party's endorsed candidates for the June 28th, 2022 primary, so you can learn more about their backgrounds and unique stories. Today, I am especially excited to welcome my good friend, Daniel Pogo Pogorzelski, a candidate for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Dan, it's good to be here with you today.
Senator, always an honor.
Thank you so much, Dan. And, for our listeners today, I want to get them a little bit of a flavor about Dan Pogo Pogorzelski. And for those of you who don't know Dan is a unique character, a unique personality. He's not your run-of-the-mill politician, I'll tell you that much. Dan, you're a big fan of history, and I always considered myself a fan of history until I met you, and then I realized how little I knew. So tell the listeners about your involvement in history and the things that you've done in your life, having history as sort of an important part of your life. It's more than just an area of study. So fill us in on that a little bit.
I guess it all comes from a philosophy that I have of you want to change the world for the better. We're all co-responsible for what goes on in the world. And for me, we are doomed to repeat our mistakes if we don't know what preceded us. And for myself, I've always been attracted to those stories that people pay less attention to. And out of that, I've been able to say that I've been involved, whether it's been, there was actually a conference, the Society for Industrial Archaeology, that I had the honor of being a part of on the steering committee, co-authored a number of history books, been involved in an organization called Forgotten Chicago, once again about overlooked aspects of Chicago's built environment. And all of these interests come back to that I really want to share these overlooked truisms, these overlooked facts, which really impact our environment. And if we want to make effective change, then we need people to be cognizant of that past. And so out of that, I've been able to have an impact, I believe. When I'm talking about, for example, the history books that I co-authored, interestingly enough, very much in tune with this position, 3 of the neighborhoods have all connected to the Chicago River. So that would be Avondale and Chicago's Polish Village. That would be the neighborhood of Bridgeport, as well as Logan Square. You have where the Chicago River abuts all of them. One of them, and the first one that I co-authored, Portage Park, does not connect the Chicago River, but its name heralds back to the beginnings of Chicago, which were a portage, a way to connect us from the system of the Great Lakes, which goes all the way out to Canada, to the Des Plaines River, which goes into Illinois, and then the Mississippi out to New Orleans. And of course, that strategic location is how Chicago came to be the city that it is.
Now, Dan, listening to you talk about history and the fact that you've authored these books, giving us your perspective, one might think that you spent the majority of your life in some deep library, looking under dusty books, earning PhD after PhD. And yet, and I say this with a sense of pride, because we are the Democratic Party, and we are a party of normal people. Mm-hmm. Your beginnings are somewhat more humble than that. Tell us a little bit about your early work experience.
Sure. So for myself, I've had a very interesting career. I was the head of a local chamber of commerce. I was union organizer. And the way that I actually began in politics was because of the fact that as a Polish speaker, the son of Polish-speaking immigrants, and here in the United States, we have a large population of people that herald from Poland that have worked in industry since time immemorial. And so myself working at Dominic's, being a member of first Local 881 and then 1546 of the United Food and Commercial Workers, I was asked to help organize factories. And it was a great experience. It was thrilling. I loved the good fight, right? On the one hand, one was engaged in trying to make a difference and doing the best that I could and being able to see that impact. So it was actually that way that I first became involved in politics. I would say that whatever I've done, whether it's been as a a tour guide for the Chicago Neighborhood Tour Program. I didn't give myself this title, being referred to as the unofficial mayor of the neighborhood of Avondale, because of my work as the head of the Chamber of Commerce, trying to connect people with the arts as an economic engine. Working part-time as Dominic's as the local deli guy with the smile on their face, always trying to pick people up and trying to get their cheese to them. No matter what I did, it was always about communication. Working for the state legislature, right? All of that work experience has always been in trying to connect people. I call myself a professional volunteer. I think that you'll find them in any neighborhood of Chicago. It's the 5 or 10 people whenever there's any kind of civic act, whether it's like, hey, let's try to form a community garden. Let's try to paint a mural here. You're always looking for those people that are willing to give up their time to try to help others. And for myself, I'd say that's been part of my career, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating part of your story that the guy who wrote history books and has, that your path to involvement in politics started at the deli counter at the local Dominick's. I mean, I think that's a wonderful part of your story, and it shows, the promise that is America, that no caste or die is set from the day that we were born. We can all have different paths, and we can all make a success of our life. And so I always find that fascinating about you, the path that you took. Let's turn a little bit, because you've been involved in a lot of races, not the least of which have been a few of my own. But you're now running for Water Reclamation District, and this has a decidedly different bend. It is, I like to describe it when I talk about you to my constituents, as I say that this is the most important government that so few people know anything about. And it has an incredible environmental impact. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in environmentalism, how it led you to seek this office?
Sure. And so my fascination with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District is rooted in so many different facets, whether it's history. This is the government entity, for better or for worse, that reversed the flow of the Chicago River. And myself, always a huge booster of the city of Chicago. When the French failed in their first bid to build the Panama Canal, who did they bring in? When the Americans finally decided that they were going to undertake this, they brought in the folks that reversed the flow of the Chicago River, the same crew. You're talking about the beginnings of Chicago, really herald back to water, our access to water, the fact that we have 20% of the world's fresh water right here at our doorstep in the Great Lakes, something that in Chicago, deindustrialization has hit us so hard, where we've lost more jobs than many other places ever had over the past half century. And the promise of what people call the blue economy, not the green economy. We're not talking about just environmentalism. We're talking about the promise of water. The 20th century, people talking about how oil was at the root of the economy, and the fact that water might be the promise of ours, that which really gets the Rust Belt finally moving again. But we have threats to it. We have not only the fact that, unfortunately, while the Chicago River has been a part of our city from the beginning, it's also been treated as an open air sewer. And it was that attitude to it that led to a lot of problems for us. This government entity was created when waterborne diseases happened on a regular borne basis, right? Where you had epidemics of cholera that happened. And thankfully, as we're coming out of our own, the past half century, we have been treating that differently. However, we have other threats like the microplastics crisis. Each one of us eats and excretes a credit card's worth of microplastics every week. This is a horrible figure. I am reminded of watching films in the 1940s, and you'll see, really dapper figures and folks all dressed up, and they're smoking away, oblivious that they are essentially microwaving their lungs, radiating them. And for us, since the 1940s, we have had where single-use plastic is everywhere. And the same dynamic that breaks down the asphalt on our roads with the freeze-thaw cycle is working here. And just this week, we have found how how microplastics have been found in Antarctica, a number of sites, in the snow, everywhere, as removed from human civilization as you can. And yet we have been successful with this, and we are poisoning ourselves, whether it's through PFAS, forever chemicals, and this. And so my own motive is that aside from these wonderful engineering marvels that we have, like the Deep Tunnel Project, building it since 1975, the most audacious public works project the state of Illinois has ever begun. But that is not going to be sufficient if we need to take on the challenges of climate change, which have altered the way that water falls, where we'll have periods that will likely be much drier and then sudden, intense rainfall, and microplastics. This means we cannot engineer our way out of this bad behavior. We need to start a conversation, which means that the 5.25 million people that live in the MWRD service area, we need to start informing them. So, as innocuous as it might be, glitter, which is fabulous, well, unfortunately, that's also microplastics that, for our wildlife, draws them the way that moths are drawn to a flame, and will find its way eventually into us. And so if we want to stop poisoning ourselves, that means we need to start talking. And I'm hoping that myself, with my resume, currently working for Treasurer Michael Ferrick's in civic engagement, that I'll be the person, the voice that will bring that as something that we start talking about.
Well, Dan, that sounds fascinating, and it sounds like a conversation that we really need to have. And I look forward to you leading that conversation in your new role as our newest and best Water Reclamation District Commissioner. Dan, as we wrap up here today, how can voters find out more about you?
Sure. I asked them to go to my website, gopogo, MWRD.com. So go, with my long alphabet soup Polish last name, people have referred to me for as Pogo since time immemorial. It's one of the reasons why you'll find me on the ballot there as Dan Pogo Pogorzelski. And my punch number is 89. You can also find me on social media. So if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, you can find me at Dan Pogorzelski for MWRD. And I really look forward to engaging with folks and talking about these very important issues.
Dan, thanks so much for joining us here today on the 80, and best of luck in the upcoming campaign.
From your lips to the heavens ears, sir, and good luck on yours, sir.
Thank you.